Today I'm joined by Sam Smith, former rugby player, played 78 times with Quins, 2 years at Worcester, and had to retire pretty early, around 26. Cheers for jumping on, Sam.
No, thanks for having me, Brian. I'm really looking forward to it.
So I'm sure we'll circle back to rugby at some point, but we connected on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, and I thought it was really cool. You put up a couple of posts about your journey after rugby. So maybe chat to me about that, what that was like.
Yeah, so I find myself talking a lot about my post rugby journey, way more than my actual rugby journey nowadays. And yeah, as you mentioned, I had to retire when I was 26. So I tore my quad when I was 25 in a preseason match for Worcester. And then I spent the sort of next 9, 10 months rehabbing that. I kept re-tearing it. So I ended up with a 15 centimeter tear down the middle of my quad, and I was a winger. So it kind of affected my speed, as you can imagine. And that's what I had as a rugby player, was my speed and finishing. And so I had that operated on, and unfortunately I couldn't get back to that same sort of top high end speed. And so I had to call it quits, like I said, when I was 26. And I had such a long time off that I was kind of going a bit stir crazy. The nature of my injury meant I was out of the club by sort of 8, 9 in the morning, and I had the rest of the day just to sit in my own thoughts and stew. And so I then started looking into what could I do alongside rugby, and the idea to start a coffee shop came into my head, which was basically just off the back of a YouTube passion. So it wasn't grounded in a lot of knowledge or understanding, but I thought I'd have a look at it. And I guess the more serious my injury got, the more serious I got about starting and opening a coffee shop. So I signed the lease for my first one in April 2016, retired in July 2016, and then opened the coffee shop in October 2016. So it was quite rapid fire from sort of rugby player to coffee shop owner.
Yeah, and how was that then transitioning over?
Um, I'd say probably messy at best and total car crash at worst. In terms of, I got so sort of wrapped up in opening the shop and running a business that I think I used it as a way of not having to face up to the fact that I wasn't playing rugby anymore. And I just really threw myself into that. I was renovating the shop sort of 14, 15 hours a day. And then I was in the shop working 14, 15 hours a day. And so it meant I wasn't ever sort of allowing myself to just be still and just sort of allow myself to just actually acknowledge the fact that I'd stopped playing. And I was able to keep that up for a couple of years. And then, yeah, probably 2 years after I retired, everything kind of came crashing down. I was drinking loads. I was doing lots of drugs, and I was in a really dark place, if I'm completely honest. And I've spoken about this a fair bit, because I think it's important for people to share stories like this so that other people who will inevitably going through the same can maybe feel a bit less alone. And yeah, it was really tough, and it was just everything was kind of getting worse for me. The business was getting better, but I was getting worse because I was just either working drunk or high. Probably is a pretty easy way of explaining where my life was at that point. And then I'm so grateful that I had a regular customer who was a life coach, and he'd been coming to the shop since we opened. And I always say that I think he probably saw the steady decline of me over that 2 year period. And one day he just came up to me in the shop and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Should we go for a coffee?" And I did what I always did, which was laugh it off and shrug and be like, "I'm fine, I'm fine." And he's like, "No, Sam, let's just go for a coffee." And so I took him up on it, and that coffee changed my life, because I then started working with him. And it was the first time since I'd retired where I'd asked for help. And I had someone who was in my corner who showed me love and compassion, which in time allowed me to show that to myself.
Hmm. Yeah, and what kind of stuff did you work with him on?
I think initially I think he just held space for me and listened. which allowed me to just talk and process and work things out. I hadn't allowed myself that space to even start to think about how I was feeling or acknowledge it. I'd just gone straight to the various distraction techniques that I mentioned earlier, because I guess it was too painful for me to sit with those emotions and those feelings and those thoughts. And so, yeah, initially it was really just someone who's slightly removed from my life who was able to just listen and ask the right question at the right time. And then sort of after that initial phase, it just became about starting to create good habits again. So I think I got back into running, started a daily gratitude journal, which I still do sort of 5 years later, which I often talk to my clients about doing, and it's often met with a bit of a blank face, and how can that make a huge difference to your life? And I would attribute that to like probably being one of the single most important things I ever did, was starting to write 3 things I'm grateful for every day. Because in time, I went from someone who could only see the darkness and all the shit things in my life to someone who nowadays something bad happens to me and I'm instantly looking for where's the positive? What's the opportunity here? What can I learn? And I think that such a simple exercise done consistently over time, it really does rewire how you think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny you say that. Heard about gratitude about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and kind of was on and off with it. And then about 4 months ago, I was just, it felt like I was kind of pushing up against a wall or banging my head against a wall or just, I
Mm.
don't know, I was just a bit flustered. And I said, right, I'll go back to doing the gratitude 10 things in the morning, 10 things in the evening. And
Mm.
it's like I just feel so much better. And there's maybe some
Yeah.
other things, but I think there's something within us that we're always, as humans, we want to strive for something more, like be it
Mm.
in any area of our life. We're geared towards that, like that's to grow. But then the kind of problem with that is you're never there. You're always in a deficit, and the gratitude is just, yeah, what kind of grounds you, isn't it?
Yeah, it has just there's like a magic quality to it where you can have had what feels like a really crap day, and then actually if you just take 30 seconds to sit down, and there's always 3 good things, or like in your case 10 good things, even if it's been the crappiest of days, we're very quick to label the whole day as being shit. And that's never the case. So every day has ebbs and flows and good bits and bad bits. It's just what we decide to latch onto and the stories that we want to tell ourselves about it.
Yeah, and like mine, some on the bad days it could be like that the sun came up, that I have
Yeah.
food in the fridge,
Yeah.
that I have a roof over my head. Like when I say 10, like I'm it's not too much of a stretch. There's sometimes they're like everyone has them nearly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I remember when I got into it, some days literally just almost taking the piss out of the process and being like literally such trivial things, but it doesn't matter. It's just again, it's that consistency of showing up and changing the way you think.
Yeah, because like I say, they change the way you think. It does. It rewires you.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a really good TED talk by a guy called Sean Aker, who whenever anyone doubts me when I suggest it, I send them that one because it's really funny, and he comes across as such a lovely bloke. But he talks about doing this 3 daily gratitudes, and he explains kind of like neuroplasticity and the neuroscience behind it. But it's a really good watch. It's obviously 15, 20 minutes, but it really explains why it works. And it is that we do you do literally see the world through a different lens, and you see it through a more positive lens, and that can only be a good thing in my book, because that then affects how you view everything.
Mm. And it affects how you are in the world, which has more knock-on effects again, I feel.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you the easiest way to explain it is you go from a glass half empty to a glass half full person, and I know who I'd like to be around. The kind of, I'd much rather be around the glass half full person, and I'd also much rather be that person, because you're not going to let stuff get to you as much. You're going to find opportunities where before you might have just walked away or had a bit of a hissy fit. And again, like these micro changes, I think as humans, we want there to be a one big fix that fixes everything. And actually, it's about building these tiny little practices and habits that on their own feel like nothing, but when you put them together and bolt them all together, the more you do them, and the longer you do them, the bigger the change. And I think that was something that Hugh, who was my original life coach, said to me that has always stuck with me. Is and it's he said that just because we've got complicated locks doesn't mean we need complicated keys. And I just absolutely love that. It's like, you just because you've been depressed for 5 years, or you've been anxious for 10 years, or whatever the thing you're battling with is, it doesn't mean you're going to have to do 10 years to get out of it. It can be really quick and fast. And that was my experience, is once he'd held space for me and I'd kind of got back to, I'd kind of offloaded everything that needed to be offloaded. It was then just about these tiny little practices and habits, doing them consistently, showing up every day, and life turns around very fast. But when you're in it and you feel like everything's awful and your life isn't how you want it to feel, it can feel like you've got a mountain to climb. And doing those tiny little things might feel like, what's the point? These aren't going to help. But I would just urge anyone out there who is in a rut to just choose one thing, one positive action to change that they do every day. Do that over 3-4 weeks, you're going to start to see some changes. And then you're going to have capacity to add in something else. And then you're going to have more capacity to add in something else. And that, to me, is what growth and development is. And we do have the ability to change stuff really fast.
Yeah, 100%. It's so true what you say, the small things. And I went through a similar-ish experience somewhat to you, in that I got injured 5, 6 years ago playing rugby, and then went into a dark place, drinking, doing drugs as well, and to get away from it all. And then I started looking into, I was like, I need to get back to being me. Like, how has this happened? And
Mm.
wherever I looked, be it psychology, philosophy, spirituality, mindfulness, wherever I looked, it was just these little things that you would think don't make a difference. And
Mm.
that's all I could find. And so I just start doing them. Whatever it was that they said, I do it. And that's exactly it. It's those small things. But when, yeah, if people can be very quick to be like, sure, that's nothing. Sam, 3 things, writing down 3 things.
Mm.
I don't know. It's nothing. I have bigger problems to deal with.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that, but then I guess the question I pose to those people is that, do you actually want to feel better? Because if you're not willing to do these tiny, seemingly insignificant things, like, what are you waiting for? Like, why aren't you willing to try it? And that, for me, would then become a really interesting coaching piece to work on, because if someone's coming to me and say, I want to feel better, my question is always, well, what have you tried so far? And often they've tried nothing, which to me is a really interesting indicator of where they're at.
Yeah. And how did you transition then into yourself being a coach? And are you still involved with the coffee, or did you transition away from that altogether?
So I sold my first 2 coffee shops in May, and I'm still involved in the coffee roastery, which was a different business. Um, and I'm now mainly focusing all my time on coaching. So I guess my journey in was unplanned in a roundabout way. I knew that running the coffee business wasn't giving me the fulfillment I was looking for, and I I now know that I started that business through a fear of being forgotten. I think the thing I struggled with the most when I came out was my loss of identity. I was so attached to sound the rugby player. All my self-worth was around my ability to play rugby, that I now know subconsciously when I was coming out, I think subconsciously I was like, shit, no one's going to like me, no one's going to be interested in me, I'm not going to have any friends. So what's another identity I can latch onto that society values? And I chose being an entrepreneur because that to me felt like something someone would want to talk to me at a party about, in a kind of really like low level way of looking at it. And so I guess I fell into a business that wasn't serving me, and the further I went down my own personal development journey, the less willing I was to put up with that. So I started searching for, I guess, my purpose and what it was, and I tried loads of stuff. I had loads of really quite out there ideas. Like I nearly signed up to a 2-year garden design architecture masters, which I'm really glad I didn't, because I was about an hour away from pressing the send on that. And I think I was so desperately searching for this thing that it was never going to appear. And something I say to my clients now is that you don't find purpose, you feel it. And for me, I was so like laser focused on trying to find this thing and almost crowbar it into existence that it was always going to elude me. And it wasn't until I said to myself, I'm going to stop searching for this and I'm just going to see what happens. Then literally the next day I received a text message. I've been volunteering for this charity called I Can and I Am, where they drive a double-decker bus into secondary schools, and then you have a class at a time, and half the class make pizzas downstairs, and the other class go upstairs and do self-confidence workshops. And so the day after, I said to myself, I remember writing it in my journal, like, I'm going to let go and I'm just going to see what happens. The next day, the guy sent me a photo of all the feedback slips that of the kids I'd worked with on the confidence workshop the week before. And I just remember reading these little notes from these kids and just bursting into tears. And I just had this complete visceral reaction of like, fuck, this is what I need to do. And instantly the next day I was like, right, I want to be a coach. And then I was then hit with, but I'm not good enough to be a coach. I don't have enough experience, and all the kind of classic imposter syndrome, fear-based narratives that we often tell ourselves. And I just said, no, yesterday's reaction was too big to ignore. And that's what I mean by feeling it. Like I literally felt it in my body that this was what I was supposed to be doing. And then that led me to doing a ICF accredited course, coaching course for a year. And now that's what I do. I work mainly with athletes in transition, but also with people from all walks of life as well.
Class. And I love what you say there about feeling it. And that
Mm.
is something that probably would have been a bit alien to me a few years ago, or wouldn't quite conceptually have understood it. But I've kind of been on that journey or understood that in the last 6, 12 months, or the last couple of years maybe. But it's the way you actually have to go through life, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah. Well, what's been your experience of stuff that you felt that maybe you wouldn't have done in the past?
So I, when I was younger, I studied commerce, and society said, like you said about an entrepreneur, that working in finance was really impressive. And so a big problem I had is I went kind of 50-50. Like I did rugby and studied, and then I was playing back home in the All Ireland League, playing with Connacht Day, and I was also working in an office. Like I'd be going to the gym 4 mornings a week, training 3 evenings a week, and then playing. And then I went to the States, did a master's player coach of a rugby team, and then after that went back to the kind of doing both and
Yeah.
trying to do as much rugby as I could, but working. I did an MBA, but the
Yeah.
reason I went to the States was for the rugby. It was like I got offered a
Mm.
scholarship as a player coach, but I was like, man, getting to be a rugby coach all day and play rugby, and okay, I got to do 2 classes at night during the week to tick the box, and I did the MBA on the side. But like, I love coaching. I loved it, and I love
Mm.
playing. Like when you talk about feeling, like there's nothing that lit me up more in coaching still, but in my head I was thinking of career paths and finance and this and that, and completely in my head.
Mm.
And then it was when COVID hit, I was like, yeah, no, I I have to do this. I have to step away.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, that kind of body head clash. And that's something I work a lot on with people around. We're so cognitive and heady in Western society that we can analyze our way into and out of anything, but often that gets us into trouble in the long run. And it sounds like what you did was trusted that kind of body intuition, that gut feeling, or that I was talking about gut or heart, and whether we can listen to those kind of wisdom centers rather than always just relying on our head.
Yeah. And another thing, about 8 weeks ago, 9 weeks ago, I had, so when I got depressed and all that, kind of read all the stuff myself, done the work myself, and about 6 months ago, I was kind of like, things are good. I'm really happy with how things are, but there's just some areas that it just could be better. Like I've kind of
Mm.
never been better, but I know there's something else. Like it's just not right. And so about 8 weeks ago, I started going to therapy, to a therapist, and what I've found there is that I was very much in my head, even still, over the last, even since 2 years ago when I made the switch. I was still very much thinking, like, how will this work out? How will that work out? I want to be
Mm.
here, and just thinking, like, how will I do it? What can I put out there? What can I strategy, tact, all in my head? And some of the work that I've done there is like unraveling stuff and letting go, and just,
Mm.
yeah, letting go. And so now the way I kind of said it to her is that I feel like I'm living from the center of my chest. Like I
Mm.
I breathe every morning. I take time, as Joe Dispenza talks about it, like visit the quantum field, or where there's the time space, and to really get out of your head and meditate. People call it, whatever the word you want to put on it. I do that in the morning, and I kind of sometimes at times throughout the day do it for 2 3 minutes if I feel myself getting a bit wound up. And so that's, yeah, just something of late. And it's incredible, I find, I'm finding that things just happen for you. You don't need to be in your
Mm.
head thinking all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I've got a massive smile on my face, which people probably won't be able to see on a podcast. But yeah, I think you like hit the nail on the head. I think those somatic body based practices that just bring us back to the ground we're stood on are incredible. For me, like anxiety is about being in your head in the living in the future, worrying about what's to come. And every time I catch myself there, which is a lot, I do some breathing techniques or a centering practice just to find my feet on the ground and just bring myself back to where I am. And I think kind of related to this, you touched on it earlier, of that feeling of like always wanting to get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and planning that off in the future. A metaphor that I tend to bring a lot of my clients is this, call it the island where everything works out. And what we're doing is we all do it, I still do it today, but it's the way that capitalist society is funded, basically, is we make the thing we want to feel. So say I want to feel confident. So I go, right, well, when I get a Ferrari, I'll be confident, because that will obviously make me confident. And I put this Ferrari off in the island in the future. And what I do by doing that is I say, until I get there, I can't be happy. Or sorry, I can't be confident. And then you paddle like fuck to swim to this island. You get there, you get the Ferrari, you drive it off the forecourt, and you still feel really unconfident. And then you go, fuck, I've wasted all my life to get to this point. I must have been chasing the wrong island, so I need to go to a different island. And we can just island hop our whole life. And what we're doing is we'll never feel the thing we want to feel. So, and then the kind of the antidote to that is to look down at your feet and realize that, fuck, I've been stood on the island the whole time. Like, how can I make myself feel confident today? What do I need to do today? How do I need to change how I view myself? How I show up in the world? And that becomes really exciting, because then we stop needing to strive for stuff from a place of lack. Like, we can still strive to get to places, we can still have goals, we can still get excited about doing stuff. But I can also feel confident today, and I can feel confident every step of the way and work on that now. And that to me becomes really exciting, because then you get to start living your life today. And that's often how I start with clients. They come in and they're like, oh, well, I'm lacking this, I'm not good enough at that, I shouldn't be doing this, and I want to feel like this and achieve this. And I'm like, right. And they're like, well, it's going to take me 3 years to get there. And I was like, well, why don't we get a little bit there today? And we always can, because often the thing we want is already inside us. It's just been obscured by ourselves, by stories, by stuff that people said when we were growing up. And that becomes a really exciting practice to be in with someone.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love your analogy there. I call it the I'll be happy when. And
Yes.
you
Yeah.
can insert whatever you want there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something I'm realizing a lot, once again, over the last number of weeks, when I have been moving from my head to my body, that you can be the person that you want to be now.
Mm.
And that, like you say about the confident or whatever it is, you just be that person now. And then, and I've heard this in self-help said in many different ways, but you just become that person now and then let go, and the things that that person would get will flow to you, and
Mm.
that's fact. I'm seeing it.
Yeah. And that's been my experience of, I think I'm obsessed with letting go and staying open and trusting, because, and I guess for me, the trust has been built so much in the past 7 years since rugby, because nowhere in my life plan did it have finish rugby at 26. Like, not one part of me wanted that to happen, but it's happened. And then the coffee shop happened, and that wasn't quite right. But then that has all led me to do what I do today. And I'm happier today coaching than I was playing rugby. And I remember that when one of my big fears when I finished was that I will never be happy or excited again, because what could be more exciting than running out and playing rugby with your mates on telly and in front of thousands of people and scoring tries? Like, in my 26-year-old brain, that was impossible. But I didn't know what was best for me. And whatever force you want to call it made that happen. And that led me on this path. And I feel more at home and I feel more myself today than I ever have. And I wouldn't be here today if I had been able to script my life play by play how I so wanted it to go. And again, it's a phrase that Hugh gave me, which I love, is can you positively blame the bad stuff that's happened in your life? And for me, I can now. It's taken a lot of healing and a lot of time, but I positively blame finishing rugby early, because it's been a stepping stone in my journey.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, oh, when we were just texting, but that you went to a trauma conference.
Sorry, I just lost you there.
Oh, sorry, you mentioned when we were just texting that you went to a trauma conference. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that was
Something I
a couple of
find.
weeks. Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say, yeah, I just went, a couple of weekends ago at Oxford Uni. It was a 4-day trauma conference with loads of workshops and talks.
cool, and that's just something that I'm interested in or learning about, and just understanding that. I think for us to be like we're kind of talking about free and open, that yeah, from what I understand, you have to heal your trauma.
Yeah. So the work I do is, we don't work with trauma. We're very forward looking, but I mean, I work with a therapist to work through my own trauma from my childhood and my adult life, and I think the two together in tandem are really powerful, because there will be things that have happened in all of our lives in the past that are affecting how we react to stuff in the present. And then coaching then is then how do I look forward and then create the life I want. I think to do the two side by side can be super powerful.
Yeah, 100%. And as cool as I say, creating the life you want, and that's what it is, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, the term I always use is like crafting the life of your dreams, and it can sound a bit cheesy, but I kind of like that, because how else would you want to live your life in my books? Like I believe we can all do that, and I guess from a coming from the coaching side of it is that you don't have to do it alone, which I think is a lot of what people in our society believe. We've become so individualistic that all of the pressure is put on us to do everything, and actually what we're really missing is community, and to be in a relationship with a coach who has got your back, who wants what you want just as much as you do for you, that loves you and sees you and hears you and understands you, is super powerful, because it's something that a lot of us are lacking. And that relationship can create so much value in people's lives, because often it's something that a lot of people have never experienced.
100%. And did you see any coach outside of your clubs when you were playing rugby, like sports psychologists, mental skills, or anything like that?
So I used to, when I was at Harlequins, I used to do speed coaching with Margot Wells. Um, and without realizing it at the time, she also did loads of mental skills stuff as well. And I think I probably went for her for the speed work and then stayed for the mental skills and that support, because she was a huge influence on my career. And just having a sounding board away from the club was really important to me, to talk about how I was playing, how I was feeling. And so much of the work we did was around confidence and showing up and performing in the way that I wanted. And yeah, so she was really instrumental in my career on that side. And then there was a time when I was at Harlequins where I was suffering really badly with depression, and I ended up going and seeing a therapist. But at that point in my life, I thought there was only one type of therapy, which was talk therapy, and it wasn't massively helpful, I don't think, for where I was at that point. I think there were probably some other modalities that might have been a bit more useful, because I was so stuck in my head that I think it would have been really helpful to have worked with someone who helped me get out of it. But I think that I know you'll know this better than me, but it feels like current players are a lot more aware of the different options they have out there and the importance of working with people in these fields.
Yeah, I think it's definitely changing. I think it's definitely changing because 10 years ago, I would have seen it as a weakness, and
Mm.
yeah, would have been. You like you say about you want to do it all yourself. You think you can do it all yourself. You think you need to do it all yourself because you don't want
Mm.
to achieve it, but haven't got help. That's what I
Yeah,
would have been thinking.
yeah. And I think the other thing to add on to that is that from the outside, well, this is my experience of being in a professional environment, it felt like every other player didn't need that help, because none of us were talking. So then you're in an environment where it feels like the other 49 guys or girls are really mentally tough and they've got everything sorted and they're not having the same worries as you, which for me made me feel like the odd one out. But I now know, talking to my mates who have retired, that we all felt exactly the same the whole time and none of us fucking spoke about it. And how useful would it have been for one of us to suddenly open up, and then the others could have felt, wow, I feel like that too. And yeah, there's just so much power in that. And I'm laughing because I just know the power of it now, and I know how much of a difference it would have made to have been more open and vulnerable with my teammates. But I just didn't have that capacity at the time.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what screwed me up as well. Like, I remember I'd
Mm.
be just going up to higher levels or whatever and thinking, "Oh, I'm not good enough to be here. I'm not really confident." But the rest of them are really confident. They're all
Yeah,
so confident.
yeah,
Like, and you know,
yeah, yeah. It's mad, isn't it?
yeah, it's crazy. And I suppose when you're a young fella, you don't know. You know, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm.
And you said there
Yeah.
that you prefer what you're doing now to playing rugby.
Mm. Yeah, I get the same, like in the sort of 20, 15 minutes build up to a coaching conversation with a client, I get the same pre-match kind of jittery stomach and excitement. And I genuinely, like I said earlier, I genuinely thought I'd never feel that ever again. So it's magic. And I don't feel like I'm working, which again is how I felt playing rugby. So I believe, and it's why I'm working with other athletes who are going through transition, because my transition was so painful that I just want to help other people not feel the depths of the lowness that I felt. Like I can't take that away from people, and you need to go through a grieving process, and it will be painful. But what I hope to be is a support and a companion to people going through that, because I know how valuable that would have been to me coming out of the game. And I think again, I think it feels like we're at a bit of a turning point, of the fact that people are finally talking about how hard transition is for athletes, and the more people can tell their stories and share their experiences, the better. Because I spoke to a lady called Marissa, who is one of the founders of a company called Reboot, who are creating a community space for retired athletes, the other day, and we were talking about, like, every athlete when you're in the game has a support group. They have physios, coaches, medics, teammates, everything. But what would it feel like if an athlete knew that when they left they needed to have a transition team? So make it so part of the culture that it's okay to have a team of people to help you transition in a way that feels good. Because a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment is with people who have been retired for 10 years, who are miserable because when they retired, they fell into a job that doesn't serve them. And we're now unpicking the last 10 years of their life. But that's really hard, because at that point, they've probably grown to quite a senior level. They're earning quite good money, and it actually becomes quite hard to come out of something and start again. Whereas it'd be magic to be able to actually work with these people as they're coming out, or before they come out, because then you're actually starting to talk about, like, what's my identity away from sport? Who am I? What do I enjoy? What lights me up? Before you have to start making those decisions. And then when you do come out of the game, you can make some informed decisions rather than just going with the first company that offers you a job because you're panicking.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that falling into something like the first company that offers you a job, panicking, and then yeah, you get trapped. And I think that happens to people I know. I know friends of mine as well, and you know, the same thing. But you leave college,
Mm.
and the first job you get, and then that's you. And it's like then
Yeah.
the is it the sunk cost fallacy?
Yes. Yeah. It's that. Yeah. I've invested so much time in this. I can't possibly switch. Or people talk about the golden handshakes in corporate, that golden handshakes, golden handcuffs, where you're tied into massive bonus structures, but you need to stay another 3 years, and then you stay 3 years, and they give you a bigger one, but you've got to stay another 3 years, and it becomes really tricky to get out of that situation when you've got a family and a mortgage. But I guess it's, yeah, again, it comes to that question of would you rather be happy or would you rather make a bit more money? And that becomes a question that I get excited about exploring with people.
Yeah, 100%. And the happiness, when you were saying that, I was just thinking that, and you can't put a price on it. Like I think about it now, like I just love, yeah, like you, I just love what I'm doing so much. I understand exactly what you're saying about before a coaching call, and I work with predominantly with athletes that are still playing, and it's, yeah, it's so enjoyable, and like you say, it doesn't feel like working at all. I look forward to it, but yeah,
Mm.
you see it on a call. Most of mine are on Zoom, but you know the moment when they're like, yeah, like they just aha moments are just when you know you can see, you can feel the difference, you can see and feel the difference,
Mm.
and that you're making, and it's so rewarding. That's just coaching in general, and people who coach rugby on the grass will know that too, that feeling as well. And but yeah, it's, I think it's just so important. I've done it, like I've been in an office and it just wasn't for me. Like I believe from researching that I'm neurodivergent. Like I just, school wasn't really, I didn't enjoy school, sitting at a desk or for so many hours in an office, didn't enjoy it. And yeah, I go in and do talks with companies now around well-being, and I kind of get the same thing. I was like, oh, thankfully I'm not doing that job. But
Mm.
you know, if you're not doing something you like for 8 hours a day, and then you leave that and you're still thinking about it, and it eats into your free time, we'll say, and it's just like, it's just not worth it. Like it really isn't, it's not worth it.
No. And again, like when we talk about head, heart, gut, the head will spin stories that will keep us stuck, even if our heart or gut are screaming at us to leave or change or do something. But the head will keep us in there. It will tell us stories of why we can't leave, or if we stay another 6 months or another year, or when X happens, then it will be okay. And often with this shift, if you are someone who wants to change their life, there's never going to be a right time. You're never going to feel ready. You're never going to feel confident enough. You just need to rip that band-aid off and work it out as you go along. And it comes back to that staying open and trusting that we spoke about earlier. I think that I talk about how with these kind of big changes, the universe will first, it will tickle you, and that will be the kind of feeling that you have in your gut of like, this isn't right, I shouldn't be here. And if you don't listen to that, it will then poke you, which will be quite a lot more painful. And then if you don't listen to that, it will just slap you around the face. And that event is just horrendous to go through, but it will be so powerful that it will force you to actually listen and do something about it. But the skillfulness for me comes in, can you listen to the tickle or the poke? Because they're a lot less painful. And then I guess my caveat on that is that even if you get slapped around the face by the universe and something horrendous happens and it makes you question everything, that you will also still be okay. Like we will always be okay, and we can deal with anything that's thrown our way. And whilst you're in that pain and that chaos, it might feel like you don't know why it's happening to you or what the solution is. But if you can just stay in it, stay open, and keep putting one foot in front of the other, eventually you come out the other side. And for me, coming out the other side is really exciting because then you're met with a land of opportunity and possibility, and you get to then choose what direction you go in.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. And it's so true what you say about it will always be okay.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
like we worry so much. Like we worry so much, if, and it is always okay, and it's crazy. And that's, yeah, that's mad, just how much we worry about things. And worry,
Mm.
It's something I've been thinking about quite a lot over the last while. Worry never serves us.
No.
It never really, it doesn't, because we're worrying about potential things that might happen. And this is something I kind of wrestled with or thought about, because I'd heard someone rebut it or kind of, but like, oh well, what if something bad does happen? You need to be protected, or you need to, but it's like, no, you hold yourself back, don't you? You just like constrict yourself, hold yourself back. You keep yourself small. You keep yourself closed. You
Mm.
keep yourself away from opportunities that, you mentioned the universe, and I know exactly what you mean. I agree, and that opportunities that want to come your way nearly, but you're sitting there
Yeah.
worrying, and they can't
Yeah.
get to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, when you're closed and you're small and you're thinking about all the worries, you aren't open to noticing those opportunities. You don't even see them because you're so worried about what might happen. And yeah, like playing small will never serve you, worrying will never serve you. But if you can have that trust in yourself that you are resilient enough to deal with whatever comes your way, then you can shift that energy from worrying and then shift it into who you are as a person and what you're doing. Like, imagine if you took all that worrying energy every single day and put it into the thing that you're excited about or scared about. Like, what could become possible? And for me, like, I see feeling scared and imposter syndrome. I see that as an indicator of the thing I need to be doing. Because if I wasn't scared about it and if I wasn't worried about whether I was good enough to do it, then I don't care enough about it. So if you're going to continually work on little projects that you're not scared about because they're in your comfort zone, you will just stay where you are. But if you can look at the thing that is petrifying and just take one step towards it and see what happens, that's where your life can literally change, and it can change really quickly. And another analogy I often use with clients of this is, as humans, we want decisions to be binary. We want to be able to know if it's a yes or a no, an on or off, black or white, because it's nice in our head. It makes sense, and we can really kind of categorize it. And the way I bring that to life in these kind of big life decisions is we often feel like we're stood on the edge of a cliff, and we're either got to jump into the sea and see what happens, or we stay on the safe land. Where actually, I believe that often these decisions, you're actually stood on the beach and you get to take one step after the other and slowly walk into the sea. And what I say is that always, if you're taking that route where you're going to just take a step towards the thing you're scared about, another step, another step, another step, is you can always go back. Like, the land will always be there. Your old way of being, your old life will always be there. You can always, like, if you're in a job doing, I don't know, marketing, and you want to go and set up I don't know, like an expedition holiday company. You could go and try the expedition holiday company for 5 years. It might not work. I bet you could go back to your marketing job. Like, they aren't one-way streets. And I think that when you're telling yourself it is, and that's scaring you from doing it, you're just stopping yourself from feeling alive and doing what you really want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things on that is that I think, yeah, the person who is afraid to step forward into something new because of they think it's a one way street, and oh, but I can't leave this job or whatever. Um, they're, I suppose, very insecure, and that thought came from my mind as well. It's like, finance, you earn so much money, this, that, the other, but you have to back yourself. At some point, you have to
Mm.
just believe in yourself and back yourself. And like you say, go and do it for a year, 2 years, 6 months, 3 years, whatever it is. But back yourself and believe in yourself that
Mm.
if that you will grow as a person, and that if things don't work out on this route, that you will be a better person because of it, and you can always go back to what you
Yeah.
were doing, like you say. And it's
Yeah.
that kind of real imposter insecurity, like, oh geez, I'm not good enough to be here, so I can't leave.
Mm. Yeah. And you're only not good enough to be there if you believe that. As soon as you stop believing that, you're all of a sudden you're good enough to be there, and then you
And
show
way
up as a
better.
different person. Yeah, yeah. It is like if I tell myself I'm not good enough to be here, I will act in a way that shows I'm not good enough to be here. But if I go, fuck it, I'm meant to be doing this, I'm going to show up with that confidence. And like for me, confidence is acting in the face of fear or despite fear. Confidence isn't something that you earn or you suddenly get enough of to do the thing. It's confidence is doing it despite the fact that you're shit scared of it and backing yourself that you will work it out.
Yeah. And it's like when you say about stepping forward and kind of stepping forward into unknown, doing something new, and it happens all the time. Like, and even on your journey, I'm sure it's all the time you're doing new things that, you know, you're. It's not like you make a leap and, like you say, you get comfortable and then things are great from then on. We always have to be stepping forward, taking steps into the unknown, growing to feel fulfilled. And the thing with that is it's scary. But what I've started to the last while to understand and realize myself, it's scary, but that feeling is actually exhilaration. It's exhilarating, and that's what true
Hmm.
living is. Like
Yes.
for me, there's kind of constant steps forward. Like, you know, I was working with young rugby players to start off 2 years ago because that's just what I had a younger brother and I was, you know, and that's just what I started with. And then it was rugby players of all ages and levels. And then it's some other athletes and then more recently, you know, doing talks in schools, talks with sports teams, and more recently going into businesses. And, you know, every step you feel scared, but
Hmm.
you have to do it because you can't sit there knowing you've more in you and not go forward.
Yes. Yeah, I 100% agree. And if you again it comes back to that, if you weren't feeling scared, then it's probably not worth your time to do it because it would indicate to me that you're probably not that excited about it. And I think like the feeling of anxiety in your belly versus butterflies like pre-match in your belly is they're very similar. And again, our head can decide how we label that. It can either be I'm too anxious and not confident enough, or wow, I'm really excited about this. How epic I get to have a go at it. But again, that we get to decide what label we put on that, what story we like, attach to those feelings.
Yeah, and everything that it's funny, everything that we're talking about is directly applicable to a rugby player as well as it is to
Yeah.
somebody like you and I in life. Like before you go onto a
Mm-hmm.
game, like feeling confident, letting go. That's another huge thing, letting go of control and just because that allows you to be in the moment. Um,
Yeah.
Taking a step forward, going into environments that scare you or whatever, and not staying small and all these different things. And it's funny just
Yeah.
because yeah, when I'd be starting out just you know researching more on flow state and all this stuff and thinking back and talking to people on here, and it's all the same stuff.
Yeah. I think these are universal principles, and it's making me think about. I often get really sad when I sit with an athlete for the first time and I can see how small and lacking confident they are in this next step of their journey because I'm looking at them and I just see so much potential because I'm like, for the last 10, 15, 20 years, you have shown up every single day, come rain or shine. You have done the tiny little things to get a quarter of a percent better. You have the ability to show up on a massive stage and perform. Like, if you just pick all of those attributes up that you have, but you're taking them for granted because they just are who you are and you've been surrounded in a high performance environment where everyone else is on a similar page, you take yourself into the real world, you are not normal. Like your way of being in the world is not normal. And but what you have to get over is your ego. You can't go from being in the top 0.1% in the world in your position in rugby or football or cricket and expect to be at the same level in whatever the next step you do is. you've got to just let that egoic part of yourself die and be comfortable with starting again, but knowing that if you apply the same principles that you applied to your sporting career, you will be okay. And again, like I say to them, is you didn't become a professional rugby player on day one of picking up a rugby ball. Like, it started when you were 6, and you started with love and passion and excitement and just joy of being on a rugby pitch. So find the next thing that makes you feel like you did picking up a rugby ball at the age of 6, and then be okay with the fact that you're shit at it. But knowing that you now have 20, 30 years of experience of showing up and doing what needs to be done to improve and get better. And for me, that's a really exciting place to be in. But when you're in it, I totally get it, because I was there. It's really scary, because you can feel like sports is such a little specialist subject that you can't apply the same stuff. But as you've just touched on, these are universal principles in life, and you show up in the next chapter like you did in the first chapter, and things will be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And elite athletes, they're 0.1% people. The habits and like everything, I've said it before, but like everything that I've quote, whatever one wants to label success, or whatever one wants to, anything I've done well is because of things I learned or became from rugby. It is not from sitting in a classroom doing a commerce degree or an MBA degree. It is not. It is not from sitting in an office. Simple as.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's exactly that. I'm thinking that how I've grown my coaching business was I've shown up on LinkedIn every day for a year and a half, and wrote a post and engaged with people and spoken to people. Like, that's the same as turning up every day for 10 years and going to the gym, because I didn't like going to the gym as a rugby player, but it made me a better rugby player. And you build these habits and this ability to do the things you say you're going to do as an athlete, and you can apply that to whatever it is you do next.
Yeah, brilliant. That showing up is so that's what it is, isn't it? And so many people are afraid because they know they can be at level 100, but they're only at level 1, and they don't want to put a post up that doesn't get many likes, or they don't want to put a post up that isn't great, so they don't put posts up. And I did the exact same with the podcast. I said, I'm going to do a podcast, and if I were listening to a podcast, I do listen to them. I want it out weekly. So it's like, it's got to be weekly, like you say, by showing up. And there's been many times that I haven't been happy with different things, be it, it's funny, the sound, like talking about things not being perfect. I bought this microphone on Amazon, whatever, $70 or something. And I plugged it into my laptop, and I was chatting to people for the first 6 episodes. And when I was editing back, the sound was crap on my end. And I was like, I bought this microphone. Sure, I'd put it in, but I hadn't changed the settings. So it wasn't actually. Okay,
nice.
Bad, you know,
it just looked pretty.
Yeah, exactly. But there's just so many. I think that's another thing that holds a lot of people back, is that they, like you said before, they feel they're not ready. They feel they're not perfect. They feel they need to learn more, wait for better timing, all these different things. And I've seen you on LinkedIn. And that's obviously how I came across your whatever. But it's just probably because one of these posts you were just putting up daily, and it's just happened to land on my feed. You know?
Yeah. It's that. It's like, in that example, there's not going to be one single post that I've done that has changed my business. It's the fact that there's hundreds of them, and none of them are perfect. Some are better than others. Some are really crap. And if you go back to the beginning, you'll see that there was 1 or 2 likes on every post. But it doesn't matter, because it is about showing up. And if you start to show up for stuff that you care about, you start to think about yourself in a different way. You start to have more, you start to feel more confident in yourself. You start to feel more worth, because you're like, I'm the kind of person that shows up for what I care about. And to me, that's really important. because often we say we value certain things, but our behaviors don't match up to those values. And for me, living in alignment is, can you say what you care about and what you love and what you want to do, and then can you match it up with your behavior and action? And that to me is what living in alignment feels like, because you're doing what you want to do and what makes you come alive.
Yeah, brilliant. 100%. And yeah, that's self-worth, isn't it? That's exactly where it comes from and how you have it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that belief that I deserve to live the life of my dreams comes back to that, crafting the life of your dreams. To do it, first you've got to believe you deserve it. Because if you believe you deserve it, you'll go and do it.
Yeah, and we all do deserve it. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, like people might be telling themselves stories because of things that have happened, or they might be so fearful because of things that have happened, or just all the baggage, trauma, whatever that people are carrying, that they might think they don't deserve it, or look at that person doing that, I'd love to do that, I feel like I can do that, but I can't.
Yeah. No, definitely. Whenever I talk about self-worth with people, I always think of this one client that I worked with who, he went through absolute tragedy. He was at the Manchester Arena when there was the terrorist attack at the Ariana Grande concert, and he lost his wife and then suffered life-changing injuries himself from the bomb going off. And I met him 6 years later, and he said he referred to himself as a shadow and a ghost of his former self, and just zero self-worth. And the coaching was the tiniest things. That he had a latte, a coffee machine at home that he only turned on and made lattes when his kids came to visit. He only used the surround sound when they were visiting. He only cooked dinner when they were there. He was living off microwave meals. Had like a fountain in his garden. Those like all these tiny little acts every single day where he was not showing himself that he believed he was worthy of living a nice life. And the coaching was, he started to do those things for himself every day. So he started cooking dinner every night, making a latte every morning, turning on his fountain, turning on his surround sound. And the way I view these tiny little acts is, like when you go to the supermarket and they give you one of those little plastic coins to put in the charity box at the end, I see it like these tiny little acts of I believe I'm worthy. Every time you do one, you put in a little coin in your own box. And over time, those little acts build up. And the transformation was, all he wanted to do was go back to his original job. But he's now on the board at the trauma center at the hospital where he was looked after. He's mentoring other terrorist attack survivors, and he's lobbying government for changing and how they deal with the survivors of these attacks. And it all started with him cooking dinner for himself. And I say that because anyone listening in is where in your life are you not showing yourself the love that maybe you deserve? What could be one tiny act that you could do for yourself each day that you're not? Because again, it comes full circle back to the daily gratitudes we spoke about at the beginning. These seemingly tiny, insignificant things, when you start to add them up, lead to huge change.
Yeah, big time. That's unreal. Well done. And something I think as well for that showing your self love is how I see it. It comes up in me is giving myself a break sometimes. So, like the way it shows up for me is that I'll do 10 things. I'll get up, I have the morning routine in the gym, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm getting a load of work done, I'm busy, and then it comes to 3 o'clock and I sit down and have lunch or what I have food, and I realize an hour and 15 minutes is gone. And just allowing, in the past I would have been like, Brian, come on, like you can't be taking an hour and
Mm.
15 minutes for lunch. Like that's no good. Like if you were in an office or just comparing like work ethic, and
Mm.
because that's how I see myself as someone, I just yeah, work, get up early, do my thing and whatever. But I would have been hard on myself for those little things. And it's for me,
Mm.
it's just allowing myself. It's like, Brian, the sun is out today. The weather's changing in New Zealand right now. It's becoming spring, and for me, just giving myself that space to just sit outside and just eat my lunch in the sun is a big
Yeah.
change for me. Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, that sounds awesome. And again, it's seemingly tiny, but I bet it's not.
Oh no, it's huge because it's huge because the thing is then you put yourself into a spin for the rest of the day. You
Mm.
know, if I say kind of beat myself up at some point during my day, and that some point could have been in the morning. Like I really don't go on my phone for the first few hours of the day. I stay away from it, and for lots of reasons, for mental health, for productivity, for just yeah, just leave it. And I'd go onto the laptop or whatever and do, but it could be, if I go on for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and I find myself, yeah, just on my phone, just parking it there and not just saying, Brian, you're useless, you're crap, come on, that's no good the day. And then the day goes because you're living in that story
Mm.
for the rest of your day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important what you're saying around how being really selective around the language we use when we talk to ourselves. Because I'm sure people have heard this, but like the way we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't talk to our worst enemy a lot of the time. And again, like we've spoken about, this stuff like the gratitude builds up collectively over time. So does the negative self-talk. And we all have that voice in our head, that inner critic or the judge, depending on how you want to refer to it. Some people give it a name, but that voice is really skillful at, it knows what buttons to push, when to push them, how hard. And that can be such a game changer for so many of us, is just changing that relationship we have with ourselves in our head, the words we use, and those changes again are seemingly insignificant, but they build up over time.
Yeah, big time. And it's, yeah, treating yourself like the person you love most. Like, how would you,
Mm.
if the person you love most in the world did that, what would you say to them?
Yeah, yeah.
And it wouldn't
And
be
so
like,
yeah,
Brian, you're
that's a really
useless.
good, yeah. Sort your shit out. Yeah.
Yeah, and be a coach. Like, be your own coach.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, that's where journaling comes in. Building a daily journaling practice for me is it's a sense making exercise. It's a way of coaching yourself. It's a way of processing stuff, seeing stuff from a slightly different angle. Because I think again, if we live in our heads, we just are constantly looking at ourselves dead on in the mirror. Whereas when you work with a coach or journaling, you get to shift that view by 10 degrees and you can see yourself from a slightly different angle. And that's where you start to bring awareness, and then awareness then leads to the decision about whether you change behaviors. And then that then leads to sort of lasting change in my eyes.
Yeah. And how do you journal?
How do I journal?
Yeah, say to someone who's, like I don't journal as much as I should, or, I do different things like affirmations and gratitude and what went well today, what didn't go well today, or what can I, improve on, or, just I have a few different things. But yeah, so like, once again, people have heard about practicing gratitude, people have heard about journaling, and what's your journaling? What's it look like?
So yeah, my daily practice will be at the end of the day, I'll just write, I am grateful for dot 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 3 times. and I just write that. Sometimes it'll be a word, sometimes it'll be a paragraph, and that will just depend on what I need at that moment. And then not every day. I used to do it a lot more frequently, but I think sometimes when I've got a lot going on in my head and a lot of questions or things I'm working on, I'll then just free write for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. And for me, free writing is just putting a pen down, trying to get out of my head and just start writing. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to write about, but what I love about it is that eventually, at some point, as you start writing, you do drop out of your head, and it feels like the pen is writing it itself. And then what you're doing there is you're tapping into subconscious, and you're tapping out of the overthinking headiness that we all live in. And for me, that's a really powerful sense making exercise, because you do it and it just starts to connect dots in ways that you wouldn't have connected otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. That's class, and I do that a little bit. Usually on the weekend, I'll we're just writing out if the morning of the weekend if I have time, and
Yeah.
it's really powerful. It's powerful that, and it's funny that moment of you start from your head, kind of. I'm gonna go journaling now, or some. For me, sometimes I do, and then I'll be writing, and you're kind of wanting to get the good feeling that you can get from this, and then you just keep going and going, and then, as you say, at some point you start to feel great. It's just like and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
they're going from the
100%.
head to the body, and it just, like you say, it feels like it's
Yeah.
writing itself.
Yeah. It's another way of coming back to where your feet are and just grounding yourself. And it is, I do see it as it's like self-coaching, because you think that the reason you're anxious or worrying is because of X, but when you start writing, you're like, oh, I'm actually worried about this, and it might be completely unrelated, but you just haven't allowed yourself to work that out or process that. It's really powerful.
Yeah. And are there any other things, any other daily things that you feel help you be your best you?
Um, so I walk loads. So I I try and have as many like meetings on the phone that I can, so not always on Zoom. And if I can, and I'll say to someone, well, will you be happy if I'm walking on this call, like before we book it in? And then sometimes you have an hour of Zoom call. In an hour, you can do close to 10,000 steps. So for me, like doing that, getting out with the dog, I do a lot of yoga. So I do yoga probably about 4 or 5 times a week. And I skateboard once or twice, that was me kind of reconnecting with my kid and doing something that I loved before I played rugby. And I've absolutely loved getting back into that.
Cool. Yeah, I think playing is so important, and we lose that when we. I've found anyway myself. Yeah, I'm literally had the thought of going back playing Gaelic football just recently. It's like a sport, an Irish sport that I played growing up before rugby got here around that time as well, and loved it. Just like
Yeah.
just loved it. And I found that I go to the gym now, and I stretch, and have done yoga in the past, and I'm going to the sauna, and I'm doing all these different things that I enjoy. But that kind of play, I think we need that play, that free play.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think I did a lot of that. These are the exercises that I should be doing. And I'm always really wary when I say should. And that was, for me, was continuing to go to the gym, starting to do CrossFit, running loads. Like, they were things that were okay. Like, kind of enjoyed them, but then finding yoga and skateboarding, again, it's a bit like the coaching. Coaching doesn't feel like work. Those don't feel like exercise. And I think that's something that athletes can really tap into, that you don't have to continue training in the way you trained for the last 15 years because you're no longer needing to perform at a high level. You could find an exercise or sport that you really, really love, because it really doesn't matter what that is anymore. the most important thing is that you love doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And it is enjoyable then when you do step away, not having to lift so heavy and be sore all the time. And it's like I still enjoy going to the gym, lift weights, but just you don't have to be beasting yourself all the time. Whereas when I stopped at first, I
Yeah.
was continuing to do that, and I was like, oh, just you don't need to.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to sit down on the toilet and not have DOMs.
Yeah, not be sore for 2-3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cheers, Sam. Thanks so much for your time. Been unreal chatting. And where can people find you? You mentioned LinkedIn. Where is that the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so if you just find me on LinkedIn, Sam Smith, I don't have a website because I'm kind of enjoying building this business in a slightly unusual fashion. So I'm literally everything for me is on LinkedIn. And then if anyone is interested in talking to me about coaching, I do offer everyone a free 90-minute coaching session with the view that we're going to go until we have a massive insight. And if we then both feel like we want to work together, we can discuss that. But it is genuinely a conversation for you to make some steps forward. And if you're interested in that, you can email me on sam@thisisthechangingroom.com. And I'd love to hear from you. That'd be cool.
Brilliant. And I'll link your LinkedIn in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks, mate. Thanks a lot. I've really enjoyed it. Cheers, Brian.